the same rules imposed on citizens?
Sure, yes.
Okay. Commissioner Conk.
You know, the answer to your question is absolutely yes. What I think is almost outrageous is the fact that the congressmen, men and women go out there and all of a sudden they're drinking the Kool-Aid. They're writing these laws to benefit special interests and special groups. And I tell you what, though, until we change the kind of people we're sending out there, we're going to have the same kind of results.
Representative Copeland.
The answer is yes, and I will be glad to sponsor that bill and ask other colleagues to join me. It's shameful what Congress is doing. The most recent example was the insider trading scandal, and there's absolutely no reason why Congress should ever pass laws that apply to the rest of us that do not apply to themselves. The founders never intended for an elite ruling class. And again, welcome to North Dakota. In North Dakota, we still do it in our state legislature, where I serve, the way the founders intended. People elect neighbors from among them to go and represent them in the legislative branch of government, in that representative body. They serve there for a limited time. They come back to their shop or their farm or their classroom or whatever it is, whatever kind of business they're in, whatever kind of a job they have. They live under the laws they pass, among those they represent. That's the way the founders intended Congress to be. That's the way it works for us. I go to the grocery store and people say, you know, about that bill you guys talked about 2 weeks ago, I want to talk to you about that. That's the way it should be. And if I have anything to say about it, and if I'm your congressman, I'll work to make that happen.
I would be remiss if I did not follow up. We said that anybody who mentioned a name would get a chance to do a rebuttal, and Representative Grandy said that she would basically say, I will not take a pension. She wants a citizen legislature. So I'm going to ask each one of you who has not responded to this yet, starting with Commissioner Kramer, would you go to Congress and refuse a pension?
I have to be honest, I don't even know what kind of a pension members of Congress get. I don't even know that they get a pension, but it must be pretty good. I have no idea whether it's lucrative or whether it's standard or whether it's any different than a public employee or a wage earner would get. So I would be unprepared to answer that question. But if it's something extreme or special or privileged beyond what the normal marketplace would be, absolutely. And I would lead the charge to change it for all members of Congress.
Mr. Olson?
I'm also not entirely familiar with what the pension includes. I think that would probably make a pretty big difference. Certainly won't mind having a pension, but I think that the salary is probably sufficient. I wouldn't take any excessive amounts of money out of for the job.
Commissioner Collins?
This question's a no-brainer. I would not take the pension. You know, this is the problem in D.C. People go out there, regular people, and they come back millionaires, and they stay out there because they want to keep getting their money, they keep getting their pensions. What you need to go out there is work hard, do what's right, and come back home. So, you know, my goal when this thing is all said and done, to go back and teach at North Dakota State, not to be a career politician.
Representative Copeland?
Well, you know, political gimmicks might help you get elected, but they won't necessarily help solve our country's problems. And I don't know what the pensions in Congress are either. The solution is to propose reform across the board. If 1 of 435 says they won't do something because they want an election, that doesn't solve the problem. What does solve the problem is to propose reform that applies to every congressman. You know, several years ago, I knew some good people that went to Congress, people like Steve Largent and J.C. Watts from Oklahoma, and they term limited themselves. I believe in term limits, but I would propose one for the entire Congress, and I would challenge each of the people here, I won't name them, to do the same. But I think that's the way to do it, to apply reform that applies to everyone. Because what happened was, some people who were elected in that same cycle said, we came to change Washington, who didn't keep their term limits pledge, said we came to change Washington, later admitted instead Washington changed us.
Mr. Kittle?
Well, a pension's a retirement plan. And if it looks like everyone else's 401k or what federal employees get in terms of their retirement, if it looks like it's market-based, then it seems appropriate that you can contribute to that and get it back. But if it looks like a perk, a special privilege for having served in Congress, then I'm back to the original statement. I live under the rules that as North Dakota's representative, that we pass. And I'm not looking for any special privilege or perk, either during that service or after that service.
All right, I'd like to, again, kind of switch gears, and I'll start with Representative Grandy on this one. And this is from the audience as well. How would you get control of the courts and have the court stop legislating from the bench? And is that even possible under the way the framers of the Constitution came up with our system of government?
Well, the court system as they stand today looks nothing like what the Founding Fathers had established. And what we as a congressional body need to do is rein that back into the way it belongs. And we do not need, nor does the Constitution leave the structure for the court system as it stands. And we could have legislation that would bring forth the change of that court system, narrowing it down to what it belongs. And the other thing is for Congress just to stand up to the court system in the fashion that it was meant to. When the courts pass or rule on something, it is up to the legislature to decide if they're going to accept or reject it. They don't have to. It is not law what they say. And if we go back all the way to a Roe v. Wade, we would should have had a Congress that said, thank you very much, but we're going to do it this way. And that's how it's supposed to be done.
Commissioner Kramer?
I would take off on what Betty said toward the end, because I think that's probably the most relevant point, and that is that Congress has abdicated its authority to the courts far too easily, just sort of caving into somehow the black robes are smarter than us, or I don't know why it's that way, Dave. This question is probably more relevant if we were Senate candidates than House candidates, because at least senators have the opportunity to confirm or deny an appointment. But beyond that, I would say this. We need to elect a lot more conservative people to every body so that presidents will appoint more conservative justices and judges throughout the entire system, and that a more conservative Senate would confirm them. We like to blame the courts for lots of things, but the reality is the courts are a reflection of our political process that elects senators and presidents. So in many respects, it's just another extension of democracy.
Mr. Olson?
I cannot think of anything that I would do as a representative that would affect that. I haven't given it any thought, so.
Okay. Commissioner Koch?
It's a great question. We get a lot of questions, but I don't think we've had anything like this one before. But I think it goes back to the point, you have three branches of government. There is a checks and balances that need to be put into place. And so the point about the Senate having a larger role than the House, I think that's 100% accurate. We have to have the right kind of people to make sure we confirm the right kind of judges. But outside of that, I think that the role of the House, if you will, is most of the legislation for a lot of laws starts out right inside Congress. So you write better laws, tighter laws that apply less interpretation for the courts. That might be the beginning. But there always is going to be that good natural give and take between the three bodies.
Representative Copeland?
Well, it's the Supreme Court, not the Supreme Branch. And that's the problem today. They fancy themselves as the Supreme Branch. There are several things we need to do, and it doesn't require legislation. It's already in a document. I think I have my copy along. It's called the Constitution. The legislative branch of government, Congress, is not asserting its authority under the Constitution. Congress has the authority to limit what the courts rule on. They're not doing that. If you ask most people in high school civic classes how long are appointments to the court, they'll say, oh, they're lifetime appointments. That's not what the Constitution says. The Constitution says they're appointed during periods of good behavior. When Andrew Jackson was president, the Supreme Court issued an opinion, and he said, well, that's nice. They've got their opinion. Where's their army? How are they going to enforce it? We need to stand up on our hind legs and assert the legislative authority, the authority to make law, and that it belongs in Congress, the lawmaking branch of government, not in the courts.
Commissioner Gill?
Well, I certainly come from the school of thought that judges are there to declare what the law is, not to ask what it ought to be and find a creative way of getting there. Honestly, as a member of the U.S. Congress, there isn't much you can do to put your stamp on that judicial system because, as was stated earlier, that's the President and the Senate's responsibility. It is, however, something that we can talk about. In a sense, use the bully pulpit of our office to advocate for a certain type of system and promote that. I was a member of the Federalist Society when I was in law school, and I joined that again and affiliated with it when I was in the Bush administration. That is a group that, at rock bottom, is looking to define what the law is. I have a lot of contacts in that group, and there are ways in which you can sort of promote that concept throughout society so that people understand it and understand that if you want to change the law, it is Congress that ought to be doing that rather than the courts. There's a lot of abuse of our judicial system too, though, that Congress can get involved with.
I will follow up this way. And because Roe v. Wade was mentioned, I don't know how everybody feels about the Roe v. Wade decision, but if you oppose Roe v. Wade, do you think there is a legislative way to overturn it? Representative Kramer, or Commissioner Kramer?
I'm not a lawyer. I don't know whether Roe v. Wade was a good law or bad law. I think that pro-life people, and I am 100% pro-life, sometimes get trapped into advocating for the repeal of Roe v. Wade rather than advocating for a culture of life. Quite honestly, Roe v. Wade is a states' rights case. I prefer a human rights case. I think we need to have a law that protects human life at conception. That's when it begins. That's when it ought to be protected. I think that the Constitution of the United States guarantees the right to life.
Mr. Olson?
Well, I think that the obvious way to change it would be a constitutional amendment, which I wouldn't support. I think the state should have their rights there. The problem, I am suspicious of giving the federal government the kind of power to decide things like that and to define something like life. That seems to me like the kind of thing that could come back to bite us, that's ripe for abuse at some time in the future. There's other countries in the world that are having significant population problems, and our population is going up very quickly. We now have more than 7 billion people on the planet. What happens if we give the federal government authority over human reproduction, and we, at some point in the future, end up with a government that wants to try to limit population using that?
Commissioner Hulk?
Well, the Constitution very well lays it out: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So, life begins at conception. There's no question about that in my mind. And the Roe v. Wade, the point of the culture of life that was brought up before, I think that's the real challenge. We need to make it easier for folks to adopt kids. We need to make it easier for folks to do the right thing, to help others that need help. So that, I think, is the big beginning of it. And also, I think as you look at the role of Congress in some of this, is that we need to look forward too. There's stem cell research right now, embryonic stem cell research. I'm against that. I'm for stem cell research. But technology and the things that we can do in the future are going to be a lot more challenging than the initial Roe v. Wade decision. So Congress should be looking forward at some of those types of legislation. Cloning is another example. But I think that would be the role of Congress, is to be able to react ahead of it instead of letting the courts get involved on the back end of it.
Representative Copley?
Well, let me begin by saying because that's the underlying question is, are you pro-life? And I'm very strongly pro-life. I need to gently correct, I agree with the sentiments of some of my friends, but I need to gently correct their source. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is in the Declaration of Independence, not in the Constitution. However, being in the Declaration of Independence, it's in our nation's birth certificate. Our founders said these truths are self-evident. They should be obvious to all of us that we're entitled to life. And they said they're unalienable, which means that we can't be separated from them. Roe versus Wade is awful law. It's the poster child for bad law. Even people who are pro-choice, or some may say pro-abortion, look at that law and say it was wrongly decided. Harry Blackmun, who wrote the decision, said he found the right to privacy, and therefore the right to abortion, in the penumbra of the Constitution. A penumbra is a halo. Well, it's not written there. It doesn't exist. So what can we do legislatively to change it? A constitutional amendment, and I would support a constitutional amendment for human life. Secondly, in Congress, I would also support the rights of states to propose that kind of amendment under Article 5, which they have the authority to do. And we were the first in North Dakota to pass that under I see my black sign. I'm not able to finish here, but hope I get a chance to revisit that.
Mr. Gettle?
Well, I was raised in a family that was very pro-life, and so that's been my upbringing my entire life. I'm pro-life. Roe v. Wade was a states' rights issue. It had to do with the state of Texas and what they could do to regulate abortion, and I'm a states' rights kind of person, so the repeal of Roe v. Wade wouldn't bother me all that much. In fact, I would welcome it. It would restore the issue to the states. But to get there, we have to be ready for it. And we have to understand that the woman in the situation who has an unplanned pregnancy is going through a tremendous ordeal. She's generally under a tremendous amount of pressure. We have to be ready as a culture, through our faith-based organizations, through our communities, to reach out to her and say, we're here to help. You're in a bad situation, but we're here to help bring this person into existence and into life. And we will be there for you. If we don't do that as a culture first, we're not really solving the problem. And the problem is a child that she's fearful of having and fearful of moving forward in her life with.
And Representative Grandi.
Thank you. The decision of Roe v. Wade was wrong, as I pointed out earlier, and I stand by that. I would support personhood legislation at the federal level. That legislation is actually already in the House, so it would be something that could be signed on to. I have come to this table tonight already endorsed by the Susan B. Anthony organization and Concerned Women of America. Because of my lead in the pro-life movement in the state of North Dakota, I'm the chair of the pro-life caucus in North Dakota. I've worked on establishing legislation about dealing with informed consent, of which is a time of commitment to the woman to educate them as best you can in their entire situation so that the proper decisions are being made. I've worked on legislation, had passed for education in the school systems for the same type of information so that we have informed consent.
Switching gears again, and because everybody thinks that this is going to be a pocketbook election, there's a lot of pundits who thinks when it comes right down to it, it's the economy, it's the fact that the unemployment rate is 8.5% or whatever it is today. I did not check before I came here. And I'm going to start with Mr. Olson. Is there anything government can or should do to help create jobs?
Leave the economy alone. Stop printing money. Stop bailing out companies. Stop spending all of our money overseas, spending billions of dollars to build infrastructure in third world nations on the other side of the world, and the money it's going to, a lot of it, to companies that are not American companies. They're offshore. I don't think that the federal government should try to micromanage the economy and try to specifically create jobs. The only way the federal government can create jobs is to hire people. And I don't favor the idea of a bigger government. They need to spend less, they need to let us keep more of our money, and we need to keep our civil liberties intact, keep things like SOPA from ever seeing the light of day so that we have the modern infrastructure that allows us to innovate and create new jobs and opportunities.
Commissioner Kalk.
Thank you, Dave. There is a role for government, and that role for government is to create the right legal, tax, and regulatory framework that folks can have that entrepreneurial spirit. You look in North Dakota, what we do in the commission every day is we have regulatory certainty so companies can invest and the jobs can spin off from that. We don't have the crazy legal system in the state. So the role of government is to set those conditions that let folks be free. You look at what's going on right now, the EPA is stifling job growth throughout the country. You look at the stopping of this Keystone Pipeline by the current administration, tens of thousands of jobs. So the role of government is to set the framework and then get out of the way and let the function work itself out.
Representative Copeland.
Is there anything government can do to create jobs? Well, pipeline would be nice. I couldn't resist, I'm sorry. But government doesn't create jobs. Private individuals create jobs. The private sector creates jobs. The vast majority of jobs in America are created, in fact, by small business. I have personal experience with that, and that's another reason why people encourage me to get into this race. They said, you're the only one that knows how to sign both sides of a paycheck. You've been in the private sector for 27 years creating jobs and building a successful business. Not only that, but my business is such that I help other businesses create jobs as they grow and succeed. And what's been said is absolutely right. The role of government is to get out of the way, to stop burdensome regulation, to keep taxes low and manageable, and to allow businesses in a free enterprise system to flourish, to start and to prosper, and to create jobs. It's been happening since our nation's existence. It's one of the things that has made our nation great. It's the reason that we're the envy of the world. And by the way, it's the reason that North Dakota is now the envy of the nation because of the policies we've crafted in the state legislature to help make that happen.
Commissioner Gettle.
Well, government does not create jobs. Individual businesses and business owners and entrepreneurs investing in their business are the ones that create the jobs. And that's important to keep in mind. But there is a lot that the government can do to stop that from happening. And that's what's going on in the United States right now. Business owners are holding back. I've had the opportunity to put together in several different places already in my campaign a small group of business owners that are friends and colleagues and folks that I know, and I've asked them, what are your top issues? Healthcare and the uncertainty there is holding them back. The EPA in some cases, depending on the industry, is holding them back. It might be taxes, lack of a long-term tax policy. We just keep hunting short-term tax policy down the road. Those are the kinds of things that our businesses want to see Congress address so that there's more certainty that allows them to do more long-term planning, which in turn would draw more investment into their enterprise, and then we would see jobs being created. It's Washington policy that's holding back job creators right now, and we need to change that.
Representative Grandy.
Thank you. No, as was been stated, government does not create jobs. I like the line from the great Ronald Reagan that says, "I'm here from the government and I'm here to help." This is some of the scariest words you'll ever hear. And that is true. The only thing that the government should be doing is creating the environment that is necessary for free market entrepreneurship to take place. And that's the only way it will work. They cannot be in the realm of regulation and over-regulation, and the portions that have been brought up when you're dealing with the DOJ and the EPA and these various organizations that are agencies that are stepping on the toes of businesses and people that are trying to advance their skills and work and jobs. That's where we're running into the problem is have government get out of the way of the people.
Commissioner Kramer?
Yeah, government can help by getting out of the way. I've heard a few of my colleagues say that they can create a regulatory environment, that we can create an environment. Government doesn't create an environment. Anytime government imposes itself on the environment, it dilutes the natural environment, the natural order of things, which is a free market, where supply and demand and the curve meets at the most efficient point. So we've messed it up so bad now we have to roll it all back. Utility regulators have estimated that it is going to cost electric ratepayers $4 trillion to meet new EPA requirements. $4 trillion, money out of individuals and businesses' pocketbooks. We need a flatter, more predictable tax code so that there can be that certainty for investment and for families. We need to control our budget, get that budget deficit under control, start reducing our debt, stop printing money, and we'll get this economy going again. So the government, what it can do is a lot less. That's what it ought to do to help create jobs.